Hey guys, today we're back in my 2022 Subaru BRZ. Just yesterday, I posted a video on the 22 Subaru WRX. We had a 6-speed manual premium. A lot of people commented and were asking, what would I prefer? How do you compare the WRX to the BRZ? Well, this is my personal BRZ. It's a 22 premium 6-speed manual. I bought it a couple months ago. Got about 3,000 miles on it. And I just drove this WRX a couple weeks ago. In this video, let's go over some of the differences and talk about some pros and cons between these two cars. Of course, there are the obvious differences. The WRX is a 4-door, rally-inspired, all-wheel drive, turbocharged sedan. It's going to be way more practical, way more spacious. It's a pretty good one-car solution. The BRZ is a sports coupe. It's a 2-door sports car. Weighs about 2,800 pounds. They both have about a similar power-to-weight ratio. The BRZ is rear-wheel drive only. It's a fun, lightweight, flickable sports car. You can slide it around, you can drift in it, have a little bit of fun sideways, and it's actually a pretty great package also. It's pretty reliable, pretty practical for a sports coupe. It's got rear seats, a decent trunk space, but still, there are some compromises to be had here compared to the WRX in terms of practicality. Let's talk about the interior. The BRZ had a little bit of an interior upgrade with this new generation. And I feel like the WRX has stayed about the same, has stayed about where it's always been. They've added this huge infotainment screen slab, which I have mixed feelings on. In my experience, that Subaru infotainment screen is laggy, buggy, and a little bit tedious to use, though you still get physical controls for volume, tune, climate controls, which is nice. This BRZ interior is a much more usable and functional space. The infotainment is a lot simpler, it works great. The climate controls are all physical knobs and buttons. The materials in here feel a lot higher quality. This feels like a nicer interior for my $30,000 to $32,000 compared to the WRX. So the WRX is kind of in a class of its own right now. It's got this rally heritage to it. It's still really fun to drive. They fixed one of the biggest issues that I had with the WRX in previous generations. They finally given it a proper engine tune. There's zero rev hang. It's super fun to drive, really nice to shift. And this BRZ also finally has a proper amount of power. Let's walk you around this BRZ real quick. We'll discuss some more things about the two cars, and then we'll take this for a drive and talk about how the two cars are on the road. So, appearance. I think BRZ definitely wins this one. This is a great looking car. The looks on this new generation have really grown on me the more I've spent time with this. I think it looks a lot more special. It's a lot more shapely. It's a sexy looking BRZ. It looks really good. I'm not sold on the rear end and the rear taillights, but I think in the World Rally Blue, it does look awesome. WRX styling is pretty polarizing. Honestly, it looks like the back end and the front end were designed by two different car companies. I like the front end on the WRX, and the rear end styling, who knows what happened there. Maybe someone's hand slipped. Anyway, it's a weird design. It's not terrible for how good the car drives. I can overlook it. One negative that I do have with the new BRZ is they've reduced the trunk opening in this latest generation by just enough that it's annoying to put stuff in here sometimes. It's still a decently sized trunk. I think the loading height might be a little bit higher. There's a little bit less vertical room as well. But you can fit a spare tire back here, which is nice, and it's enough space. But granted, the WRX has a ton of back seat room, it has a pretty large trunk. It's going to be a way more practical package. Engines. Both cars have the 2.4 liter FA24. The WRX is turbocharged, a little over 270 horsepower, a lot more torque in that new generation, and a lot better drivability. Same with this BRZ, more torque, more power. I love this new motor. And the BRZ, this engine's proven to be pretty reliable, pretty stout, naturally aspirated form. It's relatively understressed. We'll see how it does in the WRX. I know the WRX hasn't had the best reliability record these last few years. Let's head out on the road and talk about driving dynamics. So, first thing, shifter feel. BRZ does have better shifter feel. Shifter engagement is pretty light in the WRX. The BRZ has just a little bit more resistance. It's kind of the sweet spot. Of course, you can always go with short shifters for either car and kind of tweak from there, but from the factory, I definitely prefer the BRZ shifter. One area where the WRX does win out, though, is engine tuning and rev hang. BRZ has just a touch of rev hang, and the WRX is pretty much non-existent anymore. They've really tuned it all out, and it's fantastic. It's so fluid to drive. This BRZ, I feel like I'm always kind of tiptoeing around the clutch pedal just a little bit more than I would like. It's not as easy and natural to drive smoothly as the WRX is. And that's something that I really, really do love about this new WRX, is it's so much fun to drive and it's so easy to drive. I think the WRX wins out a little bit in terms of a manual driving experience because of that. Yes, clutch engagement's still a little bit funky. You can tweak the helper spring a little bit in both of these cars to your preference. Either remove it or swap it out for like an M-Tech or something like that, which is what I've done with this BRZ. Shifter feels better in the BRZ, but the driving dynamics in the WRX are really nice. I love what they did with the engine tune in that car. So props to Subaru for finally getting it right. So, turbocharged or naturally aspirated? I really want to get these two cars out on track and see how they compare in a straight line. I would love to drag race a 22 WRX and a BRZ. We'll see if we can get our hands on a WRX here soon and get them out on track and compare them. From the seat of my pants, power to weight in these two cars feels similar. WRX definitely has an upper hand in terms of torque and low down power and response. Talk suspension. The BRZ is more comfortable than the WRX. Its suspension is significantly softer, and the damping is really quite well tuned. WRX is stiff. It feels about like it always has. It feels like a performance sedan or hatchback. If you're used to a Focus ST or a GTI or previous generation WRXs, it feels about the same. The BRZ, though, is almost Toyota Camry levels of soft. It's really surprisingly livable on bumpy roads. Here in Michigan, I really appreciate the softer ride in this BRZ. Once you dial in the front end on these BRZs, they handle just about perfectly. Very little understeer with a little bit of negative camber up front. You can get the rear end to rotate beautifully with the throttle around corners, on track. Even though this has softer suspension than the previous generation, I loved the way this BRZ handled. Let's talk about the WRX. Very high limits, a lot of grip, and a lot of capability from that car with the all-wheel drive system. The steering is quite a bit different from the BRZ. This BRZ has pretty nice steering. It's well weighted, it's a little bit lighter than the previous generation, but ultimately it feels pretty similar to how the old BRZ was. The new WRX has a really fast rack and a much lighter steering feel. That car just turns in super sharp. It's almost a little bit too light to the touch, but you get used to it. There's not a lot of feel with the WRX. The BRZ definitely has better steering feel. It communicates a lot better with what's going on those front tires. But the WRX is just a point and shoot car. You can really hustle that thing. Maybe there's a little bit of safe understeer at the limit, but the capability and those limits are so high that you're probably not going to approach them very often in the dry on the street. I was actually pretty impressed with the WRX as a one-car solution. It kind of hits all the marks. The only con that I really came away with, well, two things. Looks are weird. That's kind of personal preference. And the second one is it just feels a little bit cheap on the inside. It feels a little bargain basement. There's a lot of plastic everywhere. And this BRZ, the GR86, definitely feels like an upgrade I found that the WRX was really fun and really satisfying to drive as a manual transmission car. One of the best manuals, I think, on the market right now. Yes, Subaru does offer the CVT, but honestly, I wouldn't even bother. If you want a CVT WRX, just go get yourself a Forester or an Outback Wilderness. Get more ground clearance. You pretty much get the same performance from the engine, and you've got a much more practical and usable package. Both of these cars are best enjoyed with their manual transmissions. Obviously, I chose the BRZ. That's where I put my money. So, you know, take that into consideration. I have a little bit of an internal bias here. I preferred the BRZ. It speaks to what I want out of a car. I want something that's rear-wheel drive, that I can slide around, that I can really kind of hustle and not have to worry as much about on track, with turbocharging, with heat, with reliability. I know this car well. I'm familiar with it. I'm not as familiar with the WRX. I prefer rear-wheel drive. All-wheel drive is great. It's nice to have in the winter. Other times of the year, I think it's just kind of weighs you down. Yes, Subaru has gotten rid of the STI in its latest generation, but with the way this new WRX performs, I honestly think it's probably about 90% of an STI for quite a bit less money. An STI would probably be about 8 to 10 grand more expensive than the WRX, and I just don't think it'd be worth it. You're getting diminishing returns at that point, and the performance with this new 2.4 turbo on the WRX is so good that I don't know how many people would really use the extra stiffness and drivetrain enhancements from the STI. So you can always go out and get an older STI if that's an issue. So, how can we sum things up? BRZ, softer, nicer interior, better looking, maybe not as fun to drive as a manual car, not as fluid, not as snappy and responsive. Throttle response in this BRZ is funny. When you're rev matching downshifts, throttle response sucks. You kind of have to just floor it to get the revs up. But when you're in gear and under power, throttle response is pretty good. So the WRX I found to be pretty snappy in both situations. Rev matching was immediate. It was a fun manual transmission to drive. This BRZ is still a fun manual transmission to drive, but it's a little bit tedious sometimes. It's a little bit less fluid than what the WRX was, and sometimes in some ways a little bit less enjoyable. I feel like this BRZ just needs a better tune, and that'll fix all the problems. We need a little bit better throttle response. We need a slightly more, a little bit more power from the lower end, and it would be nice to get rid of that touch of rev hang that we get when we let off the throttle and put the clutch in. Disappointments with the WRX were interior quality. It just felt cheap, but honestly, that's no different from how it's always been. The WRX has always kind of felt about like that. I like a WRX in dark gray or black. I've seen some people paint the plastic cladding, and it looks pretty good. So again, down to personal preference there too. I think ultimately the BRZ is still the better driver's car. The fact this is rear-wheel drive, lightweight, it's a fun, flickable package. This new generation BRZ is just fantastic. The BRZ is built from the ground up to be a sports car. The WRX started off as just a regular old Impreza. It's still just a 4-door economy car. So that plays into some of the differences as well. Still, Subaru's done a really nice job tuning and building and developing the WRX. It's still a rally icon. And the performance with that car is pretty awesome. I look forward to spending some more time in the WRX. Hopefully we can actually do a physical comparison between the two cars, take them both out on track, see how they compare in a straight line and around the corners. I've only driven the WRX in the wet. It was just pouring raining that whole day out at Road America, so I haven't spent any time with it in the dry. I imagine it's really, really capable in the dry. I honestly think you're going to be pretty happy with either option. Both cars have their pros and cons. If you're looking for that one car solution and the BRZ is just kind of pushing it in terms of practicality, go get yourself a WRX. At the same time, if you want a sports car and if you want that extra special driving feel and you want something that feels like a little bit higher quality of an item for your $30,000, $32,000, this BRZ is a really great option too. I've absolutely loved driving this car for the last couple of months. It's been great to get back into one of these. It was really fun on track, and it's a great daily driver too. So anyway, pros and cons to both vehicles. WRX would be the perfect winter vehicle. BRZ is also a pretty fun winter vehicle, but let's be honest, it's a lightweight rear-wheel drive sports car, not made for driving in the snow. Ideal world, I'd probably have both, but I've definitely settled into BRZ camp for now. Anyway, guys, that's my comparison with the BRZ versus the WRX. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. We'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.